Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Last week, Brazil's president pointed at the CCP for starting a biochemical warfare, while bombshell evidence from 2015 shows that's exactly what's on the CCP's mind. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki announced her intention to resign. What's the reason behind her decision? The Arizona audit battle is still fierce. A voting machine company is refusing to turn over evidence. What are they trying to hide? And finally, the long-awaited New Hampshire audit will begin on Tuesday, but it isn't done in the way the Windham people wanted. We'll go in depth to see what really happened in Windham. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. The vote to determine Liz Cheney's fate will happen on Wednesday. Unlike the February vote, the climate is very different now, with the rest of the GOP leadership, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Minority Whip Steve Scalise, both ready to vote her out. Tensions between Cheney and Republican lawmakers have reached a boiling point since last month, not only because of her attacks on Trump, but more due to her being completely out of step with the American First agenda embraced by the Republican Party. Cheney supports Biden's amnesty plan and doesn't recognize the Chinese Communist Party as the greatest threat as her Republican colleagues do. Representative Elise Stefanik, already with endorsement from Trump and Scalise to challenge Cheney's leadership role, has been actively courting GOP members for the job. Stefanik promised she'll represent the majority of the Republicans' views as the conference chair. She suggested if Cheney isn't able to do that anymore, she should step down from her leadership position. Stefanik also acknowledged President Trump had more votes than any other Republican presidential nominee in American history, and that Trump voters will be critical for Republicans to win in the next election. Stefanik warned, the more infighting we have in the Republican conference takes away from the laser focus we should have on Americans' frustrations with how dangerous Joe Biden's presidency has already been. Today, former President Trump issued a second endorsement to Elise. In a new statement, Trump said, "The House GOP has a massive opportunity to upgrade this week, from warmonger Liz Cheney to gifted communicator Elise Stefanik. We need someone in leadership who has experience flipping districts from blue to red as we approach the important 2022 midterms, and that's Elise. She knows how to win, which is what we need." At the same time, someone else in the Biden administration announced a plan to step down. Last week, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told CNN she plans to leave the role sometime around a year. She said in an interview with David Axelrod, "I think it's going to be time for somebody else to have this job, about a year from now." Her reason was she wants to spend more time with her children. Psaki is a seasoned Democrat communications veteran, starting her career on Obama's first campaign in 2008. She subsequently worked on Obama's White House communications team as his deputy press secretary and deputy communications director. But after she took the role of Biden's spokesperson, Psaki is known as the circle back girl for constantly dodging questions, avoiding giving direct answers, and not committing her boss to anything. In an April press briefing, Psaki told reporters Biden was absolutely willing to discuss his infrastructure proposal with Republicans, but it turns out that Biden didn't yield on a single item. A recent example of how Psaki dodged a question is when a reporter asked her why Dr. Fauci and the NIH funded the function, research, and experimentation at the Chinese Wuhan lab, given the controversies around the lab.
Why would Dr. Fauci and the U.S. fund that kind of experiments, that kind of research in a Chinese lab?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you super well. What was the beginning part of your question? I'm happy to send you to the NIH about more specifics of what program they funded and more details of that.
Former Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany had complained about the unfair treatment she faced at the podium during the Trump era. Oftentimes, reporters would shout at her as she left, but Psaki's job is hard in a different way. Biden's radical agenda has simply left her dumbstruck and unable to answer too many questions, but dodging them is not a long-term solution either. Maybe that's the real reason Psaki wants to resign from her position. The CCP virus has killed more than 3 million people, but one question has never been answered. Where did the virus actually come from? During a press conference last Wednesday, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro appears to claim that the Chinese Communist Party created COVID-19 to spark biochemical warfare. This is what Bolsonaro said. "It's a new virus. Nobody knows whether it was born in a laboratory or because a human ate some animal they shouldn't have." Then he added, The military knows all about chemical, bacteriological, and radiological warfare. Could we be fighting a new war? I wonder, which country has grown its GDP the most? In 2020, China had the highest gain in GDP, while the vast majority of countries suffered from a decline due to the CCP virus pandemic. China was also the only G20 member with positive GDP growth, expanding by 2.3%. How come China's economy wasn't shocked by the virus? It turns out China's exports boomed following the start of the pandemic. By December, its trade surplus was at a record high. The pandemic had dramatically increased the global demand for healthcare and work-from-home equipment from the world's biggest factory. Which country has grown its GDP the most? Bolsonaro actually made it clear without calling out the name. It was China. Now that's a pretty bold allegation, but Bolsonaro wasn't the only Brazilian official who made such a claim. At least Brazil's education minister, economy minister, and former foreign minister had linked the pandemic to Beijing's plan for world domination in the past. It's likely a consensus within the Brazilian government. What's the CCP's response? Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin replied at his weekly press conference in Beijing, quote, "Virus is the common enemy of mankind. The pressing task now is for all countries to join hands in anti-epidemic cooperation and strive for an early and complete victory over the epidemic. We firmly oppose any attempt to politicize and stigmatize the virus. If you're being accused of something outrageous and you're innocent, wouldn't you want to deny that accusation first?" Wang didn't deny Bolsonaro's allegations directly in his answer. Actually, the CCP has never ruled out this possibility themselves either. They didn't say it was absolutely false or impossible that the virus was created in the Wuhan lab. They said the virus could come from animals, but there's no proof. Simply, Beijing isn't that interested in finding out the origin of the virus, but the rest of the world is. Over the weekend, the Australians dropped a bombshell report about a document written by Chinese scientists and public health officials in 2015. The document, titled "The Unnatural Origin of SARS and New Species of Man-Made Viruses as Genetic Bioweapons," was obtained by the U.S. State Department. Released 5 years before the current COVID-19 pandemic, the paper lists 18 authors, including People's Liberation Army scientists, allegedly discussing how the SARS virus can be, quote, "artificially manipulated into an emerging human disease virus, then weaponized and unleashed in a way never seen before." The paper also includes thinking that SARS, which hit China in 2003, could have been a man-made bioweapon deliberately unleashed by terrorists. The CCP-backed Global Times quickly hit back at the report, claiming the Australian was quoting a Chinese book that's openly on sale and twisting the book's contents to support its own conspiracy theory. The book, bearing the same name as the title of the paper, was published in August 2015 by CCP's military doctor Xu Dezong. It indeed discussed the possibility of SARS viruses being biological weapons. Xu's book was on sale on Amazon but has now become unavailable. Peter Jennings, the executive director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, said the document is significant because it shows CCP scientists were thinking about military application for different strains of the coronavirus and thinking about how it could be deployed. It begins to firm up the possibility that what we have here is the accidental release of a pathogen for military use. Jennings also says the document may explain why Beijing has been so reluctant for outside investigation into the origins of COVID-19. Robert Potter, a Tokyo-based cybersecurity expert, analyzed the leaked document and said it isn't fake. Potter said, "We reached a high confidence conclusion that it was genuine, but it's up to someone else to interpret how serious it is." Now, before we continue, if you like our program, please hit the like button and subscribe. It'll force the YouTube algorithm to share this video to potentially thousands more people. And if you want to support Eye Opener, check out the merch just below the video and get yourself a mug that matters. Your support is greatly appreciated. Salute. The fight is still fierce at the Arizona audit. Senate liaison Ken Bennett told OAN last Friday that Dominion is refusing to comply with a subpoena and is hiding a second password for admin access to its machines. System admins are individuals who have the highest level of access to the voting system. In other words, they have complete and total control over the system. Admins are able to perform all functions and changes. They can even delete or alter system logs. Without the administration access, the county has basically turned over the system to the Dominion people. If this is the case, the audit wouldn't be able to break down the ballots by groups as they count. Without running batches, the county can only compare the final vote totals. Total ballots tabulated in Maricopa County is around 2.1 million. The number of ballots sent to adjudication is 11%, which is unreasonably high. Ballot adjudication is known as a process of resolving flagged cast ballots. It typically involves a small panel of people reviewing a ballot to determine whether it can be counted. The Federal Election Commission allowable rate for adjudication is only 8 out of a million. That's 0.0008%. On the other side of the country, after former President Trump endorsed the upcoming audit in Windham, New Hampshire, the entire nation is finally paying attention to a story that has been ongoing for months. Unlike any previous cases featuring high-profile attorneys or elected officials, the leading characters in the Windham Saga are a collection of everyday citizens. These patriots have been using whatever tools available to them to ensure an accurate recount of the votes. Before we jump into the latest development, let's review what really happened to the small town of Windham in the past few months. Windham is a traditional GOP stronghold with a population of 15,000. In the 2016 presidential race, Trump led Hillary Clinton by 15%. In 2020, Trump had a 6.4% more votes than Joe Biden. On November 3rd, Republicans won all 4 available seats in the state representative race. But GOP candidate Julia Soti defeated 5th place Democrat Christy Laurent by only 24 votes, a margin close enough to trigger a manual recount. After the recount, while all initially declared winners were confirmed, the 4 Republican candidates each gained about 300 more votes. Was it significant? It was. The town inaccurately counted about 3.8% of the total votes. That's the largest machine count discrepancy in the history of New Hampshire elections. The citizens of Windham wanted to know why. Both Republicans and Democrat candidates wanted to know why. They asked the state to let them rerun all of the ballots back through the original machines. The Ballot Law Commission first denied the request, citing the commission didn't feel it had such authority to issue a recount. Windham Patriots didn't give up, though. They were able to find support from the Republican State Senate. Senator Robert Guida helped them secure a special purpose legislation which authorized a universal rerun in the affected areas. On April 12th, New Hampshire Governor Republican Chris Sununu signed the legislation. The forensic audit will examine 4 AccuVote voting machines used in Windham's 2020 election, recount paper ballots in the town state representative race, as well as the governor and the senator race. The law requires the audit to be completed within 45 days of passage, which meant it must be done by the end of May. So is this a victory for Windham? Well, not quite. One crucial aspect of the audit is who will be conducting it. The audit team will be a group of 3 people. The town's Board of Selectmen, in a 3-to-1 vote, picked Mark Lindman from Verified Voting as the state's chief election auditor. But soon people realized Lindman previously signed 2 letters calling for the Arizona audit to be shut down. Despite calls and emails from New Hampshire residents to choose Jovan Pulitzer as the second audit investigator, Secretary of State and the Attorney General named Harry Hursty, who's also a member of Verified Voting. The third person was Philip Stark, chosen jointly by the first 2 picks, and he's again a former member of Verified Voting. Interestingly, Stark resigned from the company in December 2019 after he discovered Verified Voting was untrustworthy. He alleged Verified Voting was providing cover for the companies that make and sell voting machines. What's the point of having this audit if people can't trust it? Well, patriots in New Hampshire aren't giving up. Last week, 500 Windham residents rallied outside of a selectman board's meeting, pressuring the board to change their choices and select Pulitzer instead. However, Marilyn Todd, the head of New Hampshire's voting integrity group, told Steve Bannon the board said to the protesters they were irrelevant.
They just, they told us to our faces that we were irrelevant. There's video all over it. We turned our backs to them. We stood up and all 500 of us turned our backs to them. I told everybody, if you want Jovan to please stand up. Everybody in that building stood up. All 500 of us stood up. They said that they're not changing their mind. They're not going with the will of the people.
How can people get more access to you? How can they get more information on this, Marilyn?
They can go to New Hampshire voterintegrity.org. They can also email me at action@newhampshire.nh.voterintegrity.org. And, basically, we need to work really hard over here because we're not having a fair election.
Now, the citizens will hire Pulitzer themselves for their own independent audit. They have an online petition at nhvoterintegrity.org. And they're raising funds to hire 2 auditors and legal representation on Give, Send, Go. I put both links in the description below if you'd like to help. Now, win or lose, the effort of Windham, New Hampshire is a model for all. True patriots aren't afraid to fail. We will experience a lot of failure, but we need these attempts everywhere to hold government companies and elected officials accountable for their actions. Like the way the relentless efforts from the people of Windham has finally drawn the eyes of the entire nation, we need more people like them to wake up the rest. And when this happens, the best is yet to come. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, and Parler. Now don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.